Hello and welcome. And we're going to look into your mind today. You know, there's loads of people who have built their castles in the sand. This is a conspiracy. You couldn't get up to anything without us seeing you, even having a pee. Help me help you. Treason, decapitation, exile, slavery, and hiding the link to Israel. Nudge, nudge, theory. We are in a new world, a brave new world, one where only the people who need to be targeted will be targeted. Every CIA operation fails eventually. It all comes undone. The only battles we fight nowadays are their battles, not our battles, and their battles are corrupt. If you want to be a good journalist, you've got to get to the story first. But now we're in the world of AI, we're in the world of computers, we're in the world of algorithms. So they can manipulate your mind, they can change your direction. They can manipulate your mind, they can change your direction. It's true. How do they manipulate your mind? Well, they get there early, don't they? That's what they do. And who are we talking about? We're talking about these nefarious elite rulers who we posit control our society in some way. And a lot of journalists are out there saying exactly this. Welcome to a Johnny Vedmore Live. I'm very happy. I haven't done a Johnny Vedmore Live for a while, and I've got someone very special on today who's written a very fantastic piece, does lots of good work. This is going to be an interesting sort of delve into what's going on, a deep dive into eventual bigger deep dive, I think, into what's going on with the Trump education policy, something which I find massively important for the future, because everything I do always ends up back in education. We're always looking at education with my work. So I spend a lot of time doing a lot of work about young global leaders programs. I've done a lot about the things like international visitors leadership programs, the German Marshall Fund programs, various different intelligence linked youth programs which target schools, target the youth, so they can get in there early and run society exactly as they like to. So, you know, I've come across John Klyczek on many occasions. We've talked on podcasts before. I love this man completely. He's just written an article on Unlimited Hangout entitled TrumpED 2025 School Choice Corporatization, Social Impact Finance, and a Dismantling of the Department of Education. And this was something that I've been, you know, in Trump's first term, that I was very interested in his attack on the Department of Education. And it's really easy to make an enemy out of a government department anyway. But what comes next is the main question that people should have. So I'm going to bring on the Taoist professor himself, John, to the stage. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
Doing okay, Johnny. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you back. And as always, you're out doing the work. You're doing something which a load of people do not study education. Let's start off. What got you into this this realm in the first place? Give people a little bit of an idea of what you do, where they can also find you and your work, and what got you into this sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm an educator, public educator. I teach rhetoric at the college level. I've done it for getting close to 15 years now. I teach at a couple community colleges in the United States. We have what are called community colleges. They're 2-year colleges, so they don't matriculate to a bachelor's or a master's. But I also teach at one university, and so that's a place where you can get a bachelor's or a master's. I'm what they call an adjunct, so basically that means I'm not tenured track. Basically means I get paid per course, per semester, no benefits, no office, etc. So in some ways, it makes things a little bit more challenging because sometimes they call us freeway flyers because the way that the healthcare laws got changed under Obamacare made it so that they capped you at a course load at 3 courses or at 9 credits rather. The same difference depending on some classes could be more or less credits, but typically the 3 credits. So that it forced people to like teach at multiple schools like me. But the one thing that it benefits me is that I kind of fly under the radar, right? So since I'm not tenured track and I'm not trying to sign up for grants and I don't get a release to do administrative stuff, like kind of as long as the students are happy, no one really pays a whole lot of attention to me. So it enables me to be very critical of my own discipline, my own field, and still keep my job. What got me writing about it in this vein, there was an instance shortly before Trump got in his first term, and the governor of Illinois was stalling on the budget. I saw it as a privatization scheme. He wanted to push public institutions into private receivership, in particular education. So in the United States, the school choice movement is essentially a corporatization scheme. It's a scheme to funnel public tax dollars into private companies known as charter schools, but also to funnel public tax dollars into private schools, even religious schools and ed tech companies through things called vouchers, education savings accounts, and then other tax credit programs. So, one of the departments that I was working in got shut down. So I wrote a little piece about sort of where I saw the corporatization going. My mentor, Charlotte Thompson Iserbeat, found the article in which I had cited her. She was the author of The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. She also worked in the Department of Education under Ronald Reagan and blew the whistle on something called Project BEST. It's basic education skills through technology. So it was essentially a plan to set up the ed tech infrastructure for the 4th Industrial Revolution through public-private partnerships between government departments, departments of education at the federal and state level, also local school districts with big tech companies that would install operant conditioning algorithms in computerized ed tech that would condition students for workforce training and what they call career pathways. And so she wrote the foreword to my book. We became really good friends. She helped me get in touch with my publisher at Trying Day. And we became really good friends. I spent much time with her over the years after lockdowns occurred and they put us online. It gave me the travel abilities, the freedom. And since I didn't have to be in a classroom to go visit her, I lived there for a month. When she, at one point, when she passed away, she passed down all of her books, her library, and all of her files. So basically 90+% of everything you see behind me was hers, plus the actual files. That was 13 file cabinets, 34 drawers, was probably a stack that goes to the ceiling about this wide. And so that's
You're
sort of
painting a romantic picture here. It's beautiful, but there's a lot of work involved in that, and we are literally standing on the shoulders of giants in loads of different ways, aren't we?
Yeah, when I was digging up some of her papers that kind of built some of the provided some of the background research, some of the historical context for this most recent article, it was kind of cool. Like I could kind of I'm recently an Orthodox catechumen, and coming out of a Protestant background, and kind of the iconography, you kind of you have a hard time kind of getting comfortable with it at first, but then I kind of thought about it more in terms of just like like photos of your family, right? And like the tradition, like the thing, like the church being handed down by, right, the church fathers and the martyrs and the saints. And so, like the artifacts themselves, like they have this kind of this energy that embodies the history that was passed down to the people in the current church. And when I was like digging up her files, it was like, I kind of had this feeling like it had this, like this, her spirit, this energy, this power. Like I'm, you know, all the stuff that she went through to have these files end up in my humble little hands, and then I take that, and now like that carries me onto this into this arena, so to speak. And it was kind of it was a cool feeling, like he says, kind of a, I guess, a romantic in the not in the, you know, Romeo and Juliet sense, but right, romantic in more of like the Thoreau sense, right? Like, but it's very
It's as well as that, I find exploring somebody else's research, especially if you've got access to base research, like almost the thoughts jotted down on paper as they're going, is such a, it's almost like it is crawling into someone's skin. Metaphorically, you really do have this sense of excitement, of adventure, of mystery, of where you're going to be propelled. I work with a few people here and there who are just really fantastic researchers, usually older people who are like, I got nothing better to do than do a load of research, and you piqued my interest on this one topic, and so I wanted to share all of this research. And if you can, I've honed some of those people to be like, well, help me by building up research, and then I'll, we can work out together what it all means. And that exciting adventure, that mystery of going through someone else's perception. And sometimes I meet people, and there's one lady I'm working with at the moment who's we're delving deep into London gangsters, Jimmy Savile, quite a lot of Jimmy Savile stuff we've been looking through, and it is honestly, it is amazing to find someone who researches kind of like I research as well. So you also meet people who are so akin, and you see how this all works. And this is a lot about, like I say, standing on the shoulders of giants, but those giants are like, they are not saying, oh, look at me, I'm wonderful and big. They're saying, please, I'm not getting any light to push this on to the next level, and the next level gets more serious. And we're kind of like becoming, I just want to a quick say, Hayes Reviews, thank you for the tip. That's much appreciated in these dark and hard times. There's a lot of conversation going on about this. So let's talk about this. Let's get on to brass tacks, say. What is going on in the Department of Education today? I suppose we should start with like a sort of sense of what Trump wants to achieve, and what you think he wants to achieve, and what it looks like he's aiming, the agenda is set up to achieve.
Yeah, so I mean, it might help to, since we're talking about what is Trump trying to achieve, maybe we could look at it in the broader sense for context before we look specifically at the Department of Education. They're quote unquote dismantling, which is by their own terms actually a reorganization or a restructuring. So basically just pushing the Department of Ed to other departments, and then that's going to be coupled with some school choice privatization schemes. Kind of gave you some examples of what that looks like already. But all of this sort of is encompassed by the broader Project 2025 agenda. And, for the longest time, I think it might have been publicized in 2023, but certainly all of 2024, it was public. And if anybody were to bring that up during that entire year of 2024, the knee-jerk response was often that, well, that's a liberal talking point, or that's a leftist talking point. I think there's some people after the fact, after I linked to it and screenshotted it, quoted from it in my article, there were many comments that suggested that it quote unquote doesn't exist. Okay, I mean, aside from other people that said, well, Trump doesn't like it, he said he doesn't like it, he doesn't have anything to do with it, he said he never read it, all this type of stuff. Well, I would say two things. One is that as far as it being a liberal talking point, I would say that if you say it's a liberal talking point, that's a right-wing deflection point, because it has nothing to do with looking at the specifics of the document, who authored it, and how they're connected to Trump. And as far as if Trump didn't actually read it or doesn't know anything about it, maybe he should have, because he apparently doesn't know enough about it to know that what he's doing is perfectly in line with it. And so if you take a look at the Project 2025 document more broadly, what you can kind of see is, it looks very familiar. It looks kind of like the plot to set up a unitary executive that was sort of put forth shortly after 9/11 in along with the Patriot Act, etc. And so, across the board, that's largely what it looks like. That's largely what they're moving towards. And in terms of education, what they want to do is, get rid of the Department of Education. But it's not actually, and they say, quote, return to the states, but it's not actually going to send it back to the states. Some of the discretionary block grant stuff can do that. But as far as getting rid of federal education entirely, you would not only need to get rid of the Department of Education, but you'd also need to get rid of several bills that code the entitlement funding. So for those that don't know, in the United States, the Department of Education, all it really does is oversees, administers, etc., the entitlement funding. They do have, again, some discretionary block grants that they can hand out, some funds as they sort of see fit. And they can incentivize the adoption of certain pedagogies and methodologies through those block grants, but also through some research and development projects through the regional education labs at the Institute of Education Sciences. But the vast bulk of what it does is it just administers, oversees, and regulates and enforces the entitlement funding. So if they go through with their Department of Education Reorganization Act and they don't repeal several bills, which include the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the Higher Education Act, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, and the Every Student Succeeds Act. The WIOA is actually more of a Department of Labor thing, but it does dovetail with the Department of Education because they enter into some public-private partnerships for career, technical, and adult ed, and those are geared towards workforce training, funneling students into these career pathways, into the labor market, so to speak. But if they don't get rid of all those bills, then necessarily those entitlement fundings have to go to other departments. And that's exactly what is stipulated in Project 2025. The bulk of those will go to Health and Human Services. Second in place would be Department of Labor. Also would be Department of Justice, Department of Commerce, Department of State. Their Treasury could have an involvement as well. So, and if you looked at when Linda McMahon, who has been nominated as the Secretary of Education, during her confirmation hearing, when they asked her if they were going to get rid of the entitlement funds, she said no. She said, we just want to fund them more efficiently. So, right, just perfectly in line with Project 2025. When they asked her, if you get rid of the department, what are you going to do with the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? How are you going to enforce those entitlements? She says, well, I don't know if it wouldn't be better served at HHS. Totally in line with Project 2025 and specifically what they stipulate. And then they also asked her, well, if you get rid of the Office for Civil Rights, then how are you going to enforce Title IX? She says, well, I don't know if it wouldn't be better served at Department of Justice. And this is also exactly what's stipulated in Project 2025. So as far as getting rid of the Department of Education goes, Trump can say that he doesn't know anything about Project 2025, but that's exactly what this project or this program, this education agenda is. It also lines up with what he stated in Agenda 47. And if you look at the authors, the contributors of Project 2025, close to 30 of them were part of his first administration, and several are part of the current administration. So it looks like all signs point to their education agenda is, in fact, the Project 2025 agenda.
And is this agenda really the reallocation of accountability across multiple departments so that there's not one horse that can be whipped? People have to go through loads of different channels or conduits. Is that one of the parts of it, at least?
Possibly. I think that part of so in education, I think that Well, first of all, that used to be the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And Linda McMahon said several times during her confirmation hearing that I don't know that it wouldn't be better if it went back to a model that was more akin to HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare. And if you get rid of the Department of Education and you push it into HHS, all you're sort of doing is kind of reverting it back to the way it was, right? So you had Health, Education, and Welfare. What they did was they took the Office of Education and they ballooned it into its own department. Then they took Health and Welfare and they combined those into Health and Human Services and then ballooned that into a separate department. So basically all you're going to do here is get rid of the agency that would be in charge of education proper, which we would hope would mean like academics, right? As opposed to like Department of Labor, Workforce Training, or Health and Human Services, mental health, social, emotional learning. I wager that at this point they can have the ed tech do most of the data tracking and most of the actual pedagogy methodology based on just data mining students and the adaptive learning feedback algorithms, right? That can take the place of the actual instructional part of what the Department of Education would oversee, and then have everything else be reduced to health outcomes and labor outcomes. And so this could be more easily streamlined if the data that is gathered from ed tech can basically be put on probably a blockchain ledger. And we might touch on that when we talk about ESAs. And your education ledger will essentially be divided into your health ledger and your labor ledger and maybe a criminal justice ledger. We're going to take a look and see, right, if you have any algorithms that suggest you're at risk for becoming a delinquent or maybe even a terrorist, especially if you might in your LMS post a discussion thread or write a paper that's critical of Israel right now that Pam Bondi is, right, they're looking to, especially if you're not a citizen, to deport people that express certain anti-Israel, anti-Zionist sentiments. That could be part of the DOJ, part of how things are sort of the data is gathered. But I think that the distribution into other departments is only to streamline and to reduce education to these other social credit metrics, right, that basically have nothing to do with education.
Okay, so we are. You mentioned ESAs there, which are education saving accounts. What is it? What's the issue there? What's happening there? And is this is central to Project 2025?
It's definitely central to the school choice agenda more broadly. So 2023 or 2024 was labeled the year of school choice because of the vast number of states that either passed school choice legislation or at least introduced it. Most of those emphasize education savings accounts, but specifically in Project 2025, there's two school choice plans laid out. One is for the education savings accounts. The other one is for tax credits, but we'll stay with education savings accounts for now. What they want to do is take the Title I funds and take a portion of those and put those into education savings accounts. So Title I funds are funds that go to schools that are in impoverished areas, in areas that fall below a certain economic bracket. And so instead of putting all those funds into those public schools in that area, they're going to take a portion of that and they're going to put it in what's called an education savings account. This is not like a 529 education savings account that the IRS regulates and can reimburse in terms of taxes, where you take your own money and put it in a savings account and then can get some kind of tax credits through the 529. These types of education savings accounts are more akin to vouchers. And I think I've even come across articles where they refer to them as neo vouchers. Sometimes they refer to other types of tax credits as neo vouchers too, but again, we'll stay here for the time being.
Oh, neo vouchers.
Yeah, because so with vouchers, so what they do is they're going to give you basically a check, right? And it's going to be allocated only for eligible participating certified schools, private schools. They could be religious parochial schools, but they could be just, you know, private schools in general. Okay. So the vouchers, they can only go there. And they had a lot of problems with voucher laws, because especially if they were to go to religious schools, they would often be challenged on the instance that, you know, separation of church and state, you're giving public dollars to religious schools. So they found some loopholes in this through the SGO tax credits and through the education savings accounts. With the education savings account, instead of giving you a voucher that's authorized for a specific school, the argument is that we're giving the parents the funds, and then it becomes their money, even though it's going to be highly regulated in terms of what you can actually purchase. But rhetorically, then, right, it's not the government giving it to the school, right? You have a choice in how you use those funds, and they can be for private schools, they can be for religious schools, but they could also be for home schools and what they're now calling micro schools, which is essentially a term that they're using for a phenomenon that's grown quite a bit since lockdowns, and that is the co-ops or the pods, where families that didn't want to be in the lockdown schools with all the crazy woke stuff and the masks and the mandates would find a couple other families in the neighborhood, and then they'd sort of team up and maybe take turns teaching and go teach at one person's house one day, another person's house the next day, and they'd sort of pool their resources, and in some instances might even file them collectively as some sort of a charter, and then that would be a micro school, right? So and if you take these education savings accounts, though, right, so if you were to take these dollars and use it to pay for these home schools, what you would essentially do is bring in federal government strings, regulatory strings attached. So if you look at some of the state laws upon which the ESAs are based, one example that I look at in the article is called the Alabama State Choose Act. And this one stipulates provisions that if you take this money, it doesn't matter if you're homeschooling, etc., you must comply with standardized testing. That's pretty ubiquitous. That's going to be the most basic regulation that you're going to have to comply with. Depending on the state, you know, it might be the case that you can just do a portfolio or minimal sort of metrics for reporting. But the other is health code compliance, right? So if you got out of the public school and your whole goal was to get away from mandates, so you created a homeschool or what they're calling the micro school, the co-op pod, and you take that money, they're going to want it back if you don't get if we go to another scenario where they're going to require you to have another such experimental therapy, so to speak. So that's sort of the government end of it, right? So these ESAs are going to span government control in that sense, right? So basically, all home schools that take this money, all religious schools that take this money, all private schools that take this money will essentially be government schools. So it's not really going to create school choice in the sense that you're going to have different choices. It's going to be more like you're going to have choices that are, the government is going to choose your choices for you, and all of those choices are going to be under the same system. An interesting analogy kind of popped in my head the other day. So I drink energy drinks. I won't plug any particular products here, but I drink some energy drinks sometimes before a workout. And I stopped in, and one of the guys that works for one of the companies was there. And he was like, "Oh, I'll buy you one." You know, he's like, our company takes care of our customers. And he starts going on and telling me about what I didn't know was that Monster owns like every different product in there, and Pepsi owns a big chunk of Monster. So this is, to me, what your school choice is going to look like, right? Like you open up the school choice refrigerator, and you got all these different things to choose from, but actually they're all owned by GovCorp, right? And so that's sort of the system that they're going to set up. There's a corporatization angle, but I feel like I should pause for a second and let take a breather and let you in the audience maybe take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, it's like the modern. I mean, vape shops. I see a lot of these vape shops popping up all over the place, like everybody is, and they're just like a selection of colors. and people go in and look at all of these neon colors and choose that neon color today and that neon color tomorrow, and I'll have that neon color in a couple of days. And they just, we're past the point where people ask questions. People are being fed. They're being fed. The system is being created in a way which is very interesting. What you described there, when you're talking about these smaller schools that have come out kind of like of the remit of government to an extent and are like community-based organizations, the governments want to co-opt that movement is obviously going to be strong. It has to be. That is, it makes me think that when I was in Chile, I saw lots of people who were schooling their children and doing daycares in like shared little houses, just like you're describing, where they'd swap over. And it seems like the standard model for people who are outside the education system in poorer countries. So they kind of have made that exist, and they have to re-co-opt it. I'm sure that this is something that's actually happening within countries like Chile too, and other countries around the world. And really, this is a step towards not only the standardization of how they run education in America. This has got to be something more, hasn't it? When people talk about Trump, of course, there's this whole idea, and what his people are doing, this whole idea that he's somehow anti-globalist, anti-technocratic to an extent once upon a time, what do you think? Are we heading towards the same world that the World Economic Forum would have mapped out 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think Derek Bros posted something the other day and asked a question which is worth considering. It wasn't too long ago, after the Great Reset and lockdowns and things, that people at the World Economic Forum were talking something about this is the time for us to rebuild trust. And he asked the question, something to the effect of, Derek Bros asked a question, it was in a tweet, I think, if my memory serves me correctly. Is this MAGA thing, is Trump, is this the trust building that they were referring to? Somebody like Peter Thiel, I mean, he spent time at the World Economic Forum. He's also a Bilderberg Steering Committee member. So there's Scott Bessent as well. He's a former Soros guy. Okay, so it's kind of in that camp, so to speak. The Project 2025 document, the advisory board of Project 2025 and several authors of the education chapter are all part of what's called the State Policy Network, and this is a consortium of think tanks that are financed largely by dark money from Koch brothers philanthropies. So these include America First Policy Institute, the American Enterprise Institute, the American Legislative Exchange Council, Cato, which is a Cato Institute, which is sort of the pseudo-libertarian organization that the Koch brothers started with Rothbard, until Rothbard broke with them, because the Koch brothers, they wanted a belt, what they call beltway version of libertarianism, where they use the government to sort of push their libertarian ideas, but really what it boils down to is just public-private partnerships, right? It's basically corporate fascism, right? And I'm noting this to sort of to dovetail with this other thing that I found in the process of looking up sort of these SPN Koch connections to Project 2025, and that is something known as the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. And the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft was created, I believe, in 2019. And the article I stumbled onto, the headline was something like, "Can Charles Koch and the Koch brothers and George Soros team up to save the world?" So you come to find out that the Open Society Foundation, George Soros Open Society Foundation, and Charles Koch Foundation both financed the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, along with Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Carnegie Corporation of New York, and Ford.
Wait a minute. No, you're not telling us that they're all working together, are you?
I mean, I guess they accidentally bumped shoulders then, because so,
well,
but in Trump, you have a Soros, an ex Soros guy, and you have all these Koch folks. So that alone, I think, should suggest that, yeah, we're going in the same direction. We're just going to get sort of a pseudo libertarian flavor this time around.
So, I mean, one of the things you say, because when you're talking about the state policy network in your article, you call it like an old swamp of neoconservative and beltway libertarian think tanks. And I really like that. Not only was it like, a nice sounding sort of sentence, but it is something that I think people are really missing at the moment, that the rebranding and the redistribution of neoconservatism in general is happening. And you talk also about, you mentioned Peter Thiel, of course, massively important to what's happening at the moment, and a lot of what I think I think he's got such a massive reach over the neo-mainstream or new indie media sort of elite. It's incredible, but he's also, from my research, he's come to fruition via neoconservatism, really. The person who placed him in his position at the Stanford Review when he first went there was, or at least funded it, rather than placed him in his position, but they created the magazine and then they funded it, was Irving Kristol, who's, of course, the grandfather of neoconservatism. And I think he's always had neoconservative strings attached to him. And the neoconservatives have the idea of it has outlived its purpose. Now that the East versus West dynamic is changing into a digital fourth industrial revolution style of cyber warfare, the need for proper perpetual military ground conflict is becoming more and more necessary between great powers. And I think neoconservatism has driven that agenda of the NGOs being planted into these regions to take over and coup countries. They've gone as far as they can with that. Ukraine is an example of that. That's as far as you can go. You can go as far as taking as much off a dominating power like Russia. You could get to the Russian-speaking people, and then you have to stop. You're always going to get a massive amount of resistance. And I think the agenda that it was created for, neoconservatism in general, has kind of reached a point where it can no longer be used under that branding and has to be changed, has to be redistributed. What I see with Doge, they're coming in and they're changing all of these agencies, they're cutting them all, but they're not. What they're doing is redistributing the neoconservative infrastructure that was created to control large parts of what they do. Now, is this what you're seeing as well? Are you seeing neoconservatism being rebranded more than disappearing and being becoming like almost the center of mainstream libertarianism? What do you think about this?
Yeah. Like, so I would say something like the Heritage Foundation, which is the main author of Project 2025. That's sort of like your arch conservative, your arch neocon think tank, right? It goes back to the 70s, I think early 70s. And by the way, just to go back for a second, when Trump said he didn't know anything about Project 2025, et cetera, the other reason why I never bought that on day one is that Charlotte Iserbyt told me that on day one, if you're in a Republican administration at the executive level, at any of the departments or in the White House itself, what you get on day one is a Heritage playbook. That the Heritage Foundation is essentially the policy-making arm of the Republican Party. So That's the way it was when she was there, and I can almost guarantee you that's the way it was when he got in the first time. And I'll tell you why I say that. It's because one of the people that was in the Reagan administration was Council for National Policy member Edwin Meese, and he was also on Trump's transition team. He's also a heritage guy. So I can almost guarantee you that Trump got a heritage playbook on day one, his first time around. I can pretty much guarantee you that he knew that that was going to be the way it was the second time around. All right. And so that's sort of the, as you mentioned, kind of the old school neocon branding is largely the heritage crowd. Some of these are really old too, Cato, et cetera, but those were some of the ones that leaned more like libertarian instead of traditional conservative. What I see happening, or what has happened over the last several years with this rebranding, is kind of akin to what occurred when Bill Clinton came to power, and they called this the broken coalition. Right. And so basically what they did was they targeted all of the marginalized and disaffected groups. This is sort of the beginning of left-wing identity politics before it got all the way to critical theory, gender theory, kind of woke identity politics. But this is where they started to target and tried to bring into the Democratic fold, right? Tried to give out consolation prizes for all the various ethnic groups and gender groups that would be classified as minority groups, right? And so they might not have anything, right? The feminists in the Black Power movement may or may not have a whole lot in common, but right, what they do have in common is that they're opposed to sort of the traditional conservatism. So we can bring them together and we can force multiply by bringing together this broken or fragmented coalition. You kind of see the same thing with the Trump phenomenon. So what you have is like traditional neocon types. Now, some of the rhino types kind of like have been resistant. I think that when Dick Cheney comes out and says that Trump is the most evil thing ever, that's actually it's like a judo move, right? It's actually to give him more credit, because if Dick Cheney doesn't like it, then it's got to be good, right? And you want to be the opposite of whatever Dick Cheney is, right? So that's kind of how I read that personally. But so you have the traditional conservative, you have sort of the libertarian right wingers, right? So the Cato people, and then you also bring in Christians, but also New Agers through the conspiracy theory realm, right? So a lot of the right-wing sort of media, I guess, as sort of like the Rumble verse, right? Sort of the Rogan sphere, right? A lot of people that got into conspiracy theory, right? You could say that they certainly during the Trump era, a lot of that media has leaned right, and in that media space, you have a lot of like Christians, but you also have a lot of kind of like New Agers, right? And these are like all three of these. So the traditional conservatives and the libertarians didn't necessarily always get along, didn't necessarily always want to get on the same team. The Christians and the New Agers certainly, right? And the conspiracy theorists were like fringe to everybody. But somehow through the MAGA operation, they brought all those things together and galvanized it behind him. And what you have effectively, as you know, is a rebranding with a new mainstream alternative media with people like Joe Rogan at the front, while he platforms all the broligarchs that are behind Trump that basically are taking the Silicon Valley, the right-wing arm of Silicon Valley, using a libertarian veneer to take over the old neoconservative sort of political base and steer it into technocracy.
So that's well said. Applause all around. You think that libertarianism is being used as a veneer, or are the elites of the libertarian movements actually more in control of society than liberals or conservatives could ever hope to be, because they kind of exist within they fill up all of the gaps, the necessary levers need to be, at the end of the day, outside the system in some way, and they always remain outside the system in that way?
Well, I definitely think that the ideal autocracy, the ideal technocracy, right, the ideal communitarian system of techno-fascism necessarily it has to be a GovCorp merger, but for it to be fully autocratic, right? The private arm of it, the corporate arm of it, really needs to hold the title, right? It really needs to be the president of GovCorp as opposed to the VP. So I do think that that has always been sort of the end game, because the other thing is that multinational corporations can traverse the lines on the map more than a national government apparatus can, right? I mean, that's sort of limited to its geography, but a multinational corporation is more amenable to a global system. So I do think that's always been the end game as we play this left wing, right wing kind of ping pong as it moves us closer and closer, step by step, towards this final culmination. I will also say, though, that this is kind of speculative, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there.
Go for it. Why not?
This is how I feel like I think that the Libertarian Party proper, and we should distinguish between some of the Mises type peoples, right? The Rothbard people, some of those that didn't necessarily aren't necessarily part of the Libertarian Party, right? As I understand it, Mises Caucus is not exactly the Mises Caucus and the Mises Institute, rather. I'm sorry, I always get them mixed up. Are two different things, and they kind of, right? They would disagree on sort of some of the more mainstream libertarians leaning into public-private partnerships, right? So
they disagree with almost everything. They disagree with almost themselves a lot of the time.
Yeah, and so we'll try to push that faction to the side and not include them in this analysis. But if you looked at Chase Oliver's nomination for the Libertarian candidate, this guy was the furthest out of all the candidates that could have been selected. And from what I understand, because I know one of the candidates that was supposed to win. Actually, we wrote a book together where I helped him write a book. Some of the chapters in it, Michael Rechtenwald, he was looking to be the favorite until I think it was Termat. Is it Michael Termat? I can't remember his first name. I think it's Termat. Was supposed to side with him and and tell the people that wanted to vote for him to vote for Michael. Instead, he told them to vote for Chase Oliver. Chase Oliver is the least libertarian out of all of them, I would say. If he's you know what I mean? As far as the things that he's like libertarian on is like companies should be able to mandate jabs, right? Versus in the meantime, he's socially, he's like, people should, I don't know if he said children should be able to get the trans operations, but it was basically like, he almost sounded more like a left-wing candidate. He sounded most closer to a left-wing candidate than anybody else on there. Now, why would we as a party, Termat, whoever behind the scenes when they did their negotiations to say, hey, vote for Oliver instead of Rechtenwald? Why would you do that unless it was what's going to happen as a result? All the people that that do actually have strong libertarian feelings and affinities, they're going to go for Trump. And Trump happened to be, they platformed him there. Like, this was the first time they ever had a non-libertarian candidate there. And you could vote for Trump there. And they had Bobby there as well. Right. And Bobby just happened to pop up and, support Trump. So all that kind of played in that direction. I personally wonder if Trump or the Trump MAGA team or somebody didn't make some backroom deals with somebody like Termat or others to say, let's get Oliver in, because that way a large chunk of people that would have voted for a third-party libertarian candidate will say, I can't vote for Oliver. I'm just going to go ahead and vote for Trump. And so that would be that fits right into what I surmise about or I infer about this right-wing version of the broken coalition. I would, let's just say this, if I would not be surprised if that was the case. If I was a betting man, I think that's what happened. I think that might have been what happened.
So we're heading out now towards like we are heading towards technocracy. I think it's hard for even Trump fans to not accept that that's what it's looking like, and most people are embracing it in some way. The alternative doesn't necessarily mean becoming a Luddite, but there is not much in the way of alternatives. What do you think the system looks like in a few years? Are we heading towards a complete educational technocracy as well? Will people be mostly homeschooled in the near future? Is this attack the first stage of attack on the education system? Is that going to spread into something where you see schools literally have to close down eventually because the attacks become much more financially orientated? What are we heading towards?
I think that their end game, their ideal system, is one in which the bulk, anything that can be done in the home with a digital device, will be done as such to save money on brick and mortar expenses, etc. To the extent that you might need to do a lab or physical education or maybe an internship, or mental health services, a workforce training, all of those could be facilitated at what they'll call community schools. But these won't just be community schools, like because some community schools actually have an elected board. They're actually public schools. It'll be a community charter school. So it'll be a private company with no elected board. And that private company, what makes it a community school is that it has wraparound services, and it's public-private partnerships with other so healthcare industries. These would be the companies that would facilitate all the services that I just laid out. And so it'll be a combination of government regulated homeschools facilitated by corporate ed tech products that are going to data mine students to funnel them into career pathways, funnel them into mental health treatments, etc., that will then be facilitated at the local community charter. The bulk of the school choice funds, if they get these things through, which I think they'll probably get the school choice bills in. I don't know that they'll get the Department of Education Reorganization Act passed because they do need 60 votes in the Senate. So I'm very doubtful that they'll get enough Democrats to do that. But the ESAs would. So in Project 2025, they lay out that you can use this money for, quote, curricular materials, quote unquote, education therapies, quote unquote, personal tutors. Now, these could be something, right? Analog, the curricular materials could be textbooks, right? But they could also be cognitive behavioral adaptive learning courseware, which is basically the digital version of the B.F. Skinner's teaching machines. These are the machines that facilitate the operating conditioning for workforce training that Charlotte uncovered in Project Best. It's worth noting that a couple of those companies that facilitate adaptive learning courseware include Clever and Newton, both of which are financed by Peter Thiel, or have been at least. Education therapies could be a human speech pathologist, but it could be also a social emotional learning biofeedback wearable. So it could be like a heart math wearable that you put on, and it data mines your EKGs, and you do a trademark breathing exercise to get your heart rhythms and what they call heart coherence to manage your test.
And you stare at the spinning circle and listen to the voice tell you how the day should be.
Well, they do have some kind of like sometimes they're cones or other things that you focus on for the ADHD management system.
I bet they do.
It was called Neuro. Well, there was BrainCo still, okay, but there's NeuroCore, no longer functional. It was funded by, and I think Betsy DeVos was also on the board of trustees or the board of directors. Can't remember. She had to step down. She became Secretary of Ed. But it's a wearable that data mines the brain waves, and it's to help manage ADHD. And one of the things they do is like some gamified app where you have to pay attention to this game or this movie, and when it senses that your brain waves are kind of distracted, the movie stops. Or the game, everything pauses until you refocus. So you are kind of staring at it's not quite Clockwork Orange, but you are staring at a screen.
Wow.
And, right. The feedback between your response to the screen is supposed to help you zone in your ADHD problems. But it could also be what's known as there's a robot called Moxie, and it's what they call a social GPTX. So this is where we start to straddle the categories between education therapies and personal tutors, both of which, right, could be human, but could be AI. So for Moxie, and Moxie can just do regular like academic tutoring, but it's designed for social emotional learning. So it's particularly designed for the reason why it's called social GPT is that instead of it being a large language model by itself, which basically just data mines, right, patterns in speech and text and can be prompted with speech and text, and then can go to the internet writ large and pull out other patterns of speech and text to respond appropriately and to mimic a conversation, hopefully moving you towards some sort of educational outcome. The social part is that it can do that not just with text and speech, but it can do it with facial expressions correlated with emotions, right? It's supposed to help children with autism that are on the spectrum. It's supposed to help them be able to parse facial expressions in the robot, respond to them appropriately, and then transfer those skills to other to real human interactions. But it could also be other types of GPT AI that include OpenAI has one, and then Khan Academy has one called Conmigo, which was trained on OpenAI. OpenAI being set up with the help of Elon Musk, also, Sam Altman being the head of it, both of whom have been tapped by Donald Trump. Elon Musk has also bankrolled Khan Academy. Elon Musk and Peter Thiel also being part of PayPal Mafia. And this is important to note because not only are these oligarchs financing this edtech infrastructure that's going to be used for this social credit system, et cetera, but they also are sort of the pioneers in fintech. And my next article is going to look at how one particular individual who is an author of the education section of Project 2025, Jonathan Butcher, wrote a Heritage Foundation article in which he's promoting the use of fintech to administer the ESAs. And he's looking at things like Class Wallet and a company called Odyssey being financed by Andreessen Horowitz and another venture capital firm that in its portfolio, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but in its portfolio is Palantir. So, right, and being in the Thielverse and all that, and so what they want to do, and they're also looking at not just fintech that supposedly, and you'll note that this has been a phrase that's being thrown around a lot. It's supposed to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. Supposed to prevent families from using their education savings accounts inappropriately for purchasing products that don't fall under the particular codes. And so they'll have this Class Wallet or Odyssey, which will have a dashboard of products that have been verified with a code, and that your ESA dollars would be verified with a code, and that you can only purchase these things that are verified. Well, that would be much more efficient if they can get their blockchain crypto type stuff in. And this is entirely what we're seeing with the administration writ large, right? That he's saying something to the effect of he wants to have be the crypto AI capital of the world. So I think that part of what they're going to push for during this administration is a financial overhaul to bring in not CBDCs. We're going to rescue the republic from CBDCs by putting in a basket of private crypto tokens. And those can be programmed for whether various entitlement funds. This will help manage the waste, fraud, and abuse that Musk is chainsawing, right? So we'll have tokens for education, tokens for health, tokens for Social Security. Most likely those tokens will be attached to a range of impact investments, sometimes what they call pay for success. And so because they're programmable, so you can only use them for certain things at certain times, they lend themselves to impact investing where, right, you get these based on what you do, right? You'll get more tokens if you do really good in the modules. If you don't, we won't give you as many, right? If you follow the health regimen and improve your health metrics, we'll give you more tokens. Otherwise, that's, we will have to put you through a behavioral program, this type of system.
Yes. And I think we are all actually within a behavioral program most of the time. My work on Musk was a lot about that, and that's what's going to happen as everything becomes more technocratic, is that the training in technocratic world is usually subliminal, it's implicit, it's there with whatever you watch. And very interesting. Some of the stuff you said there was fantastic, really interesting stuff. Sparked a few things. Hayes Reviews said Black Mirror season 1 episode 2 forced people to watch ads. They covered their eyes, the ads stopped playing and didn't continue until they opened their eyes again. If you think about that on I mean, as a young lad, I would have loved to be doing 10 things at once, but you had to keep pausing something or getting something else on the go and start something new every time. If it only existed if you observed it, what type of and you did multiple things at once, that would be a crazy world. Everything you look at becomes animated only at the moment you observe it. That is something that I can't even imagine what type of benefits that has to programming. Hayes Reviews also says he thanks for great discussion there. AM as well, connecting with any public school, no matter the incentives, spells trouble. All these tools online, yeah, been there. I taught for several charter schools in California, homeschoolers. Also enjoyed it. Don't like Khan, that's true enough. And Mazzy says, wonderful Mazzy, or a tailored MK Ultra technique. You can just imagine top and there's a lot of action going on. I love a little bit of conversation down in the chat. Thanks for everybody. There's tokens, pant, Skinner's dogs. Yeah, there's lots going on with I don't even understand most of it nowadays. To be perfectly honest, what all of this means financially, when you watch the older generation lose grasp of what's actually happening, and you go, these guys can't keep up. Well, I'm having trouble keeping up now. I'm starting to feel that maybe age is relative to the speed technology advances, and we're already there. And there's David Upness has asked, what a concept, the animation upon observation scenario. I mean, that is just worrying. What do you see then? Coming up to the end now, I mean, we've been on for an hour. What do you see? There's, I mean, I got a couple of questions. What do you see the world of tomorrow looking like? I don't want to skip too far, and there's there's CIA links in with all of these things as well. There's always intelligence links wrapped around. There's always companies like Unit 8200 lingering around in the background too. Palantir, of course, all these intelligence linked super companies. If these people are designing the future of education, what do you think education looks like in 20 years' time?
Well, I mean, so we sort of laid out some of the ecosystem or the infrastructure, but essentially it's going to be part of, a larger social credit infrastructure. And the social credit system, if one of the ways we can think about it is it's essentially a giant Skinner box, right? It's essentially canvassing the world with a bunch of digital technologies that can data mine all exhaustively everybody's biopsychosocial metrics, right? So imagine a world like Larry Ellison has envisioned. By the way, Larry Ellison, who's tapped for the Stargate project by Donald Trump, he was also one of the first one of the seed funders of the very first. Well, it was the first large. There was a couple small pilots that were before K-12 Inc., but the first one that went nationwide, the first one that anybody ever really heard about was K-12 Inc. Okay, K-12 Inc. was the first virtual online charter school. This was the first virtual online schooling platform where you could basically plug in the digital adaptive learning courseware, the Skinnerian apps. Okay, and it should also be noted that K-12 Inc. was set up by the founding chairman was William Bennett, who was the Secretary of Education. He came after T.H. Bell, and so he took on the mantle of Project Best, which then became Project Slate, and then sort of became other projects. But Bennett, his speechwriter was Peter Thiel. Okay, and so what I'm getting at here is that, right, even the virtual online charter schooling industry, which sets up the infrastructure for the digital adaptive learning courseware, was set up by guys like people that set up Palantir, right, which is essentially a predictive analytics system of cybernetics that could facilitate the type of stuff that Ellison is talking about, where you have basically AI nodes everywhere filming everything all the time and sending out drones every time they get a red flag or something like that. And so the you could see that the school choice virtual online charter schooling industry and the ed tech industry writ large is just sort of the educational arm of the ubiquitous cybernetics necessary for social credit that tracks and traces everything from your health metrics to your job metrics to your criminal justice metrics to your workforce metrics. It takes all this data in and then determines your access to the public square or private commercial services based on those. And if we talk about the tokenization is key, because the way that operant conditioning works, it works with sequencing punishments and rewards based on feedback loops. And punishments and rewards, it could be more subtle, right? So the rewards could be like the dopamine hits that you get when you get likes on social media, or it could be sort of the punishments could be, sort of the social stigma, the ostracization if you say something that's politically incorrect, and then you're sort of shunned from the collective, right? But one probably the most the largest incentive, external incentive, is money. And so if you have a blockchain tokens that are programmed only for specific things, that can be an exhaustive ledger that tracks where every single token goes, and it's correlated to your behavioral metrics, they are integral and necessary to make the Skinnerian conditioning that is part of the ed tech. But also I should mention that when you look at a company like Dreambox and they tell you that their adaptive learning algorithms come straight out of B.F. Skinner's algorithms, they also say that these are basically the exact same algorithms that Netflix and other companies use for personalized advertising. So these algorithms are ubiquitous across the board, beyond ed tech, and the digital tokenized economy is sort of the thing that really reinforces the algorithm with the funds. And then of course those can be funneled into, again, these pay for success schemes where you have to do things in order to earn the tokens, etc. So that I think is sort of the ultimate end game in terms of broader overhead view of all this. And it's I don't think it's coincidental that if you look at the Macy's cybernetics conferences, which span the late 1940s and early 1950s, what were they looking at? Two key areas. One they called the conditioned reflex. This is your operating conditioning behaviorist psychology, but then also what they call like hypnotism. It's basically subliminal conditioning. Okay, so it's essentially the Freudian method of psychological conditioning. And both of these mechanisms are being studied across the board at the Macy's cybernetics conferences. And this is basically around the same time that B.F. Skinner is starting to look at his teaching machines, right? And so you see that, when people like von Neumann were sort of looking at theoretically the feedback loop, and people like Skinner were looking at it more specifically in terms of the domain of education. And then people like Kurzweil are looking at Moore's law, the rate at which transistors will duplicate, right, and will exponentially multiply. You can do a long-term game plan for things that need to happen culturally or societally to prime the populations to accept, right, this new Orwellian technocracy. And if you understand that a lot of the cybernetics research also dovetails with obviously military industrial complex research, like stuff at the Rand Corporation, where they had not just public planning, programming, and budgeting systems, which is a centralized planning methodology that was started by the military, outsourced to all other federal agencies, including Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And then you can kind of make that a little more dynamic with something called scenario planning, which was created by Herman Kahn. So in scenario planning, it's kind of a non-linear way of tracking, are we getting to the outcomes? So you'd have like a quadrant, like four, they have like an ideal scenario and like a less ideal scenario and two intermediates, right? And if for an example of this, there was a document that most people are probably in this audience are probably familiar with. It's colloquially known as the lockstep document, but I think it's the actual title is like Scenarios for the Future of Technology, and something was created by the Rockefeller Foundation in connection with a company called the Global Business Network, which focuses specifically on scenario planning. And what they looked at in that document was pandemic scenarios, lockdown scenarios, and what basically what we went through that was created in 2010, so 10 years prior to the event of 2020, right? And we basically used one of those scenarios as a script that's on a 10-year basis. If you can easily scale that out, and you can use something that Kurt Lewin developed called action research, where basically you're moving towards your ideal scenario and you're getting a feedback loop with the help of real-time analytics. Now with social media, we can see how people are responding individually, but also in terms of group dynamics, in terms of age group, ethnicity, political leaning, religious leaning, and we can gauge how the propaganda is, how effective it is, and so you can basically have a long-term game plan for bringing all these systems dynamics together while shaping the population culturally to accept essentially not just the ed tech arm of it, but just the entire global panopticon.
Yeah, and the global panopticon is upon
You're
us.
muted, brother. Unless it's my computer.
It might be your computer at this point.
Did my computer do this again? I told you last time this happened when I did the StreamYard, and it and for some reason I can't hear you. I don't know. Are you
okay, I'm gonna drop you down while you're trying to work it out. I'm just gonna say some things on there while John's sorting out his microphone or whatnot. And John, if you wanna come out and go back in, you can too. I find that really, when John was talking about Herman Kahn there, one of the things about Herman Kahn that's extremely interesting, of course, I've written about 1967, 1968, his work for the State Department, and he wrote a document. Within the document, it was an ancillary document for education, and within it there was a section that was on the education of a leadership group outside of normal society. I got you drinking that gallon.
See what happens.
Hey, can you hear me now? Oh, you can't hear me now, right? We got live technical difficulties here. So yeah, basically, he was writing this document 1967, 1968. It included this part which was about training leadership groups outside of society. But what John's talking about there, what John's actually discussing is this whole society is soon going to be created with the data mined information that they take from these devices that they stick on you. So these people, if we think about what their main aim at the end is, if we assume that they may be Fabians, that they may be Malthusians, etc., if we assume all of this like we do, and we keep saying at some point they're going to kill all of the stupid people, or all of the poor people, or these people, they're going to choose. The issue's been, with every generation, there's been a different selection of people that Malthusians can choose to target the population. Right, okay. And what there is an issue with at the moment is, of course, I'm just getting word, even as people produce. I think we're losing. I'm gonna just bring John up, and I'm just gonna say, see you soon. Thank you for your work, my brother. Thank you. Love. I will tell everybody where they can find you. Awesome. Thank you very much, my friend. So there you go. That's John. Unfortunately, he had computer problems at the end, so he couldn't hear us or see us, but I'll see us out anyway. That he does some wonderful work. I'm going to show you his site here. I'm going to show you one of his sites. So you can find John over here at School World Order. where you can also buy his book, School World Order, the Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education. And that's what he really looks at. You've got schoolworldorder.info. That's where you're going to find John. And of course, the article in question that we've been talking about today is the article on Unlimited Hangout. If I can find it here. This one on Unlimited Hangout, it's called, I'm started at the bottom, I was all the way down, read it all. A TrumpED 2025 School Choice Corporatization, Social Impact Finance, and the Dismantling of Education, Department of Education. Really important. John is a really good guy. He's written a few things for Unlimited Hangout. This is another really good piece. I suggest looking at his work on transhumanism, on people like Barbara Marx Hubbard too. Extremely interesting. Again, I love the man. He's great. So I'm really happy that you could join us. We got change the computer messed up. It was really interesting. Thanks, John and Johnny. Mazzy, don't worry about not putting a H in my name. I won't cry about it. David Oakness says William Bennett, Uber Republican Reagan era, once dated Janis Joplin in high school. Random errata, but shows a connection of random disparate folks in the life that came at each. It's nice to see you all getting along in the chat, having a good chat. They forget we're humans, not robots. It's true. National Council of Slovakia, new speech on GMO. Excellent. Okay, I'm really happy that you could all join us. And that's out for me. So if you need anything, come to Newspaste, of course. There's a form down at the bottom. Support John's work, support my work, get involved. There's links within the description. If you're on X, go to my profile. You find plenty of links. There's lots going on at the moment. Come watch Truth Bomb. Truth Bomb, the 4 episodes already out are really good fun. It's an independent media quiz that you'll enjoy. And that's it. I thank you very much for being with me. See you soon. Love David, love Mazzy, love little Carol, love AAM. All of you guys, excellent. Thank you very much. Of course, thank you, Ryan Bell, Hayes Reviews, Delirious Radio, all of you, William Gilchrist, thank you for joining us. Harmony Foster as well. Excellent, guys. It's been really good to have you around. I'll see you soon.